Okay. Thank you. Good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of full council. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and the recording will be made available on the council website for public listening. These are unique circumstances in which we find ourselves setting a budget. I therefore wish to highlight the measures which have been undertaken to ensure all members have the opportunity to participate fully in today's meeting. These include support, guidance, advice and guidance provided by both Democratic Services and BTS when necessary, guidance notes for meetings updated in line with changing circumstances, a number of one-to-one sessions with members needing higher level support, the option of coming into council accommodation when issues with home broadband, etc. cannot be resolved. In the event of any difficulty in casting a vote, the facility to do this via meeting chat or telephone. I also intend to call a recess for 10 minutes before a vote is called to enable members having problems with their connections to establish a method of casting their vote. These measures evidence that despite these challenges, the council has done as much as it conceivably can to ensure that all members are able to participate fully in today's proceedings. And at this point, I would like to give Vlad, as the Chief Solicitor and Monitoring Officer, the opportunity to give a legal opinion on the remote meeting arrangements. Vlad, could you give us your opinion?
Thank you, Leader, and good morning, members. I will start by summarising that my legal opinion is that the council meetings can and should be held remotely in accordance with current regulations and Scottish Government guidance. In particular, the Health Protection Coronavirus Restrictions and Requirements Local Levels Scotland Regulations 2020 and the Scottish Government guidance is applicable and enforceable. Regulation 9 specifies a person who's responsible carrying on a business or providing a service must have regard to guidance issued by the Scottish ministers. That main guidance advice is the Scottish Government guidance that we have to comply with are coronavirus guidance on working from home and coronavirus guidance on travel and transport. In particular, the guidance on working from home states as a key objective protecting the NHS and saving lives. This guidance specifically states a duty on employers to take all reasonable steps to minimise the spread of coronavirus. This includes supporting staff to work from home for those roles that can be undertaken from home. The rules also place a legal duty on individuals to stay at home. By law, everyone must stay at home unless they have a reasonable excuse for leaving the house. This includes leaving home to go to work, but crucially, only if your job cannot be done from home. Employers are responsible by law for the health and safety and welfare at work of their workers, and failure to have regard to these duties can result in enforcement actions under public health regulations. In summary, the stay-at-home regulations and guidance make it clear that there's a legal duty on individuals to stay at home and where possible work should be done remotely. Otherwise, it would be a breach of the regulations. The Council and all other Scottish local authorities in Scotland have been holding meetings remotely since at least January. This evidences the appropriateness under current regulations and guidance of remote meetings for the Council. Accordingly, my legal opinion as Chief Solicitor and Monitoring Officer for the Council is that the Council meetings can and should be held remotely in order to comply with the above mentioned regulations, guidance and health and safety law. Thank you.
Thank you, Vlad. Your legal opinion is clear and therefore I see no impediment to transacting the business today. So I'm content for the meeting to proceed remotely and accordingly approve all members' remote attendance. Could I remind members to follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off videos when you are not addressing the meeting. Should you wish to contribute to any item, you should write speak in the Teams chat function and you will be invited to speak in order. Unfortunately, because of problems with my laptop, I'm having today to use an iPad, so I cannot see the chat as easily. So I ask governance for their assistance in ensuring that we get the list of speakers in the appropriate order. Please do not, if you can use the chat function, please do not use that raised hand function because it is difficult to know who has requested to speak first. Having said that, I am aware certainly of one elected member who has a problem with his device and has to use the hand function. So if you're unable to use chat, then governance will try and pick you up and ensure that you get put in the correct part of the order to speak. Should your question or issue have been raised by a previous speaker, please withdraw your request so that we deal with the business as efficiently as possible. Please ensure that for complete transparency, there is no material posted in the chat function, which is in fact a contribution to the debate and should therefore be shared in the discussion. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. And if any member has to leave the meeting for any reason, can I remind you to either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time or write leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you rejoin the meeting. And this will allow us to record member presence and ensure that the meeting is quorate at all times. Today our agenda is focused on the budget and council tax setting, and we have budget proposals submitted by the administration group and the Conservative and Unionist group to consider. We have had a lot of discussion about standing orders at the last two meetings of council, and I will therefore draw members' attention to today's process. We have two competent budget proposals submitted within the agreed timescale, and those two budgets will be considered and voted on today. Alternative proposals will not be considered as they were not submitted in time, and members have not had the opportunity to consider them. I shall abide strictly by the standing orders in section 10.2 relating to motions and amendments. I draw members' attention to 10.2.6, 10.2.7 and 10.2.8, which I shall now quote for the avoidance of doubt. 10.6, 2.6, the mover of a motion or amendment shall not speak for more than 5 minutes. Each succeeding speaker shall not speak for more than 2 minutes and shall speak only once in the same discussion, unless to call attention to point of order or with the sanction of the leader to make an explanation. 10.2.7, the mover of an amendment and the mover of the original motion in that order shall have the right to speak for 2 minutes in reply, strictly confining him or herself to answering previous speakers and not introducing any new matter. 10.2.8, after the replies are concluded, the discussion shall be held to be closed, after which no member shall be permitted to offer an opinion or to ask a question or otherwise interrupt the proceedings or to speak except with regard to point of order or clarification, and the question under discussion shall therefore thereupon be put by the leader. But with regard to Standing Order 10.2, I have agreed with Councillor Carruthers that we may wish to call other members of our groups to provide an explanation on our budgets. In such cases, I will sanction a member to speak again. I will call the member I wish to provide an explanation on the administration budget, and if Councillor Carruthers indicates who he wishes to provide an explanation on the Conservative budget, I will call that member. We can now proceed to item 4, which is the... Item 1, the sederant and apologies. Vlad, can you provide the sederant and any apologies, please?
Thank you, Leader. I can confirm we've received no apologies from councillors, and at the start of the meeting we now have 42 members with only Councillor Jackie McCammon not present at the meeting currently.
Thank you, Vlad. Do any members have a declaration of interest they wish to make?
Leader, Councillor McGregor.
Thanks, Councillor McGregor.
Yeah, sorry, Jackie Carson is also an apology, just for the sederant. Yeah, sorry, I'll declare an interest in item 4, obviously due to my capacity as Consular Resources spokesperson. I've been involved and led on budget negotiations nationally. However, I will remain for and participate in the debate. But just to put that on the record, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Councillor McGregor. If we go on to item 3, council tax and community charges, restrictions on voting, and a report by Director of Communities. This is a procedural report presented in accordance with the provisions of the legislation, the Local Government Finance Act 1992, which came into force with effect from the 6th of March 1992, and which may affect member voting rights on council tax matters. It is a legal requirement that a member who is 2 or more months in arrears of council tax does not have voting rights in relation to fixing the council tax and requires to make a declaration to that effect. Nick Evans is here to assist members with any questions, and can I invite any questions or indeed any declarations which need to be made? No. Okay, I'm assuming everybody is able to take part, and move on to item 4, which is a report by the Head of Finance and Procurement. This report provides information to assist members in determining the council's budget and council tax level for 2021-22 and the updated 10-year capital investment strategy. The report highlights that in setting the council tax, we are required to do this based on an overall balanced budget for the financial year. The budget process was agreed by Council on the 17th of December 2020 and recognised that the late notification of the local government settlement, combined with the ongoing impact of COVID-19 and the UK's exit from the EU, made for a more challenging situation than would normally be the case. And therefore, this year we are focused on setting a budget for 1 year only at this stage. The report sets out the current budget proposition and funding gap, funding made available in the settlement to provide for a council tax freeze at 2020-21 levels, policy development funding and the capital investment strategy. And we have Paul Garrett and Gillian Ross here to speak to the report and ask any questions. So I'll open up to members' questions. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody with any questions, so I assume that people are content with the report, and we are being asked to note the provisions of Section 112 of the Local Government Finance Act. That's the wrong one. To consider the information reflected in this report as part of determining a balanced revenue budget, and consider the information. So I think we have considered both of those. People content with that? Okay, we'll go on to the presentation on the budget proposals for 2021-22. Colleagues, we are setting council tax and outlining our revenue and capital budgets under strange circumstances today, awaiting any further consequences of the finalisation of the Scottish and UK budgets, and still in the grip of the COVID-19 pandemic. Both budgets before members today have reflected the uncertainty. Indeed, the budgets are in many ways very similar. Nevertheless, of course, we are asking support for ours. We are accepting the funding from the Scottish Government to freeze council tax. It would indeed be foolish to do anything else, as the first 3% of any council tax rise would have to be returned to the Scottish Government. And I doubt that the people of Dumfries and Galloway, whatever the political inclinations, would want to subsidise the government out of their council tax. The administration has accepted 3 savings. 2 are alignment of funding for early years provision and clerical support to the funding provided by the Scottish Government for 1140 hours and involve no loss of jobs and services. And the third is the capitalisation of the cost of new IT assets. And the Conservative budget also includes these savings. We consider that it is not the time for any further reductions in services or jobs, so ours is a no-cuts budget. The experience of the pandemic has illustrated how stretched our council's workforce is, how hard they've had to work over this period. And it is highly likely that this pressure will continue as we move into renewal and recovery. It would be unwise, in our opinion, to further reduce staff numbers, even through the elimination of vacancies. Indeed, I'm surprised that those vacancies still exist, as they were offered last year, and our vacancy management policy would suggest that they ought to have been filled. Our school rolls are falling. However, we do not intend to reduce teacher numbers. With children and young people having missed so much in school education during the pandemic, we believe they will need all the teaching support that we can offer. We are pleased to be able to take forward the policy developments agreed by the meetings of council and committees. We will implement previous decisions on staff health and wellbeing checks and roll out virtual technology in our schools. Our investment in young people's employability through engagement in the Kickstart and Young People's Guarantee Scheme will create up to 120 placements for young people in key sectors such as social care. We will apply funding from the unallocated business rates incentivisation scheme to invest £2.4 million over 3 years to improve the local road network. And we will invest some of our COVID-19 recovery money in supporting the response, renewal and recovery team for 18 months. And we will augment this team by engaging 5 local government management graduates over that period. We will continue to invest in initiatives to tackle poverty through £1 million of tackling poverty funding. We have allocated the requested £185,000 for the development of our climate emergency plan, though this is far from being the total sum being invested in climate change by our council. As part of this activity, the Officer Member Group will develop an updated biodiversity strategy to be funded through corporate savings and transport costs, a double hit for the environment. These policy developments have already been discussed by committee and have been quantified, but our ambitions go further than this. The budget document, which accompanies our templates, outlines policy developments which we intend to take through committee over the coming months, allowing scrutiny and discussion as they are developed. As a result of the Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee's review into financial procedures and procurement, we will improve the Council's performance in supporting local businesses and developing community wealth building in partnership with South of Scotland Enterprise and Scottish Borders Council. Our capital investment strategy commits to phase 2 of the Dumfries Learning Town project, rebuilding Dumfries High School, moving Lorburn Primary School into the Minerva Hall and substantially refurbishing Dumfries Academy. An indicative allocation of £13.6 million over the next 10 years will secure over £80 million of investment in our region through the Borderlands Inclusive Growth Deal. We will review our capital investment strategy to ensure that it reflects our current requirements, with the intention, for example, of releasing capital funding for the carriageway improvement projects over the next 10 years. The pandemic has increased public awareness of the importance of our core path network for active travel and leisure and its value as a visitor attraction. An allocation of £50,000 towards minimal maintenance was made in the Economic Recovery Plan, which went to the Economy and Resources Committee in September 2020. We will consider how the maintenance of this network can be improved, including any further financial requirements. Our recent roads review produced 43 recommendations, and we are committed to implementing these. There is a clear desire across the Council to increase the number of 20-mile zones in our towns and villages, in particular outside our schools. These and any required funding will be considered by the Communities Committee, as will the decriminalisation of parking in the context of helping our town centres to recover from the effects of the pandemic. And working with partners such as Sueztrans, we will seek to stabilise public transport and strengthen our community transport network. We will continue with the transformation programme agreed 2 years ago. Coping with the pandemic has slowed progress, and we intend the rate to pick up as the region begins its renewal and recovery journey. Finally, members will have noticed that there are 4 names on our document this year, rather than only the leader and deputy leader. The Chair and Vice Chair of the Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee have worked hard on the development of our budget, and many thanks to them. They have, of course, been supported by the Head of Finance and his team, and many thanks to them also. Councillor Davidson and I consider that this work should be recognised and attributed. So I move the administration's motion and call Councillor Rob Davison to second.
Thank you, Leader. Good morning, members. I have pleasure in seconding the administration's budget proposal, and like you, wish to record my thanks to Councillor Wilson and particularly to Councillor Hagman for their work on our budget proposal over the past few months. This is Councillor Hagman's first experience of the role, and I trust it has not been too traumatic. I also want to place on record the grateful appreciation of the SNP group, and I expect this is reflected by all members, for the hard work of all of our council staff in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. And to them directly, I would want to say this: your dedication is inspirational, and it has been a privilege to work with you. Our budget freezes council tax, invests in economic recovery, employability, our schools and roads, and tackling poverty. It provides a robust framework with which to start to build the economic and social recovery of our region from the pandemic. Through the priorities we have set out in our political document, we go further than that. Many of the factors that we must consider in drawing up future plans remain uncertain. Even the timetable we are all working to in the lifting of lockdown is indicative and subject to change. Indeed, we have already seen that from last week to this. It follows, therefore, that not every cost can yet be fully quantified, nor yet every potential intervention fully developed. As we move from lockdown and crisis response to supporting recovery, the needs of our communities will change, and we will need to draw up our plans accordingly. We therefore propose a flexible approach led by service committees and the RRR subcommittee, in which proposals can be scrutinised, decisions made and resources allocated to meet the needs of our communities as they become clear. In doing so, we are resolved as an administration that this is an inclusive process. Other groups have made suggestions to us which we are confident can be supported, for example on facelifts for town centres, or resources to tackle dirty camping, building on some of the unfortunate experience in some parts of our region last year. It is not the standard approach to budget setting, but these are not ordinary times. It does, however, strengthen scrutiny. It enhances member involvement while leaving us collectively the flexibility to respond to events. And I hope, Leader, it is an approach which will gain support across our virtual chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. And I'm not sure whether people have been circulated with the administration's motion, so I shall read it out just so that people can hear what it is, and maybe it could be shared in the chat. One is to agree the administration's budget proposals for 2021-22. 2, agree that the ongoing uncertainty facing the region requires the Council to remain flexible and responsive in order to best support the region's social and economic recovery from COVID-19. 3, to agree that the future opportunities and challenges, along with the policy intentions outlined in the budget, will be incorporated into the Council's forward business plan and considered by the appropriate committees before the Council's summer recess. And 4, that to agree the indicative capital strategy 2021-23-24 proposed in the administration group budget proposal, and further agree that a short-term review of the strategy be carried out by the Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee. And I wonder if somebody can. Yes, yeah, it's now in the chat. So I'd now like to call Councillor Carruthers to move the Conservative and Unionist amendment.
Thank you very much, Leader. Well done for your presiding over this meeting today. It must be difficult. It's difficult trying to. I'm in chambers today. It's just the circumstances, my own personal circumstances can't actually make it to do it from home. So I think we're doing a great job today. And I could have said ditto, so I've kept mine's light because they are very, very alike. These there's a lot of commonalities in regards to the budgets that are being presented today. So I'll stick to my script, Leader. But I think I'd like to thank everybody. Thank yourself, Leader, firstly, for allowing me to come in. I'd like to thank the Council's finance team for all the support that they've given. Also, a special thank goes out to Councillor Hislop and the Conservative group for their positive contribution to the budget process. This has been a very unusual year. We were only becoming aware of this pandemic, this time last year, and what a difficult year it's been. An incredible special thanks goes out to all the staff across our public services in Dumfries and Galloway. I only ask that you keep up the good work and hold fast. We're getting closer to the end of this ordeal and getting back to some kind of a normality. It's getting closer every day. So the budget setting process has been less painful than usual this year. That's with thanks to the UK government being there to support the four nations in our time of need. Scotland has received billions of pounds over the last year from the UK Treasury, which has allowed us in our time of need to keep a stable economy and our heads above water as a nation. So today we're here to submit a balanced budget for agreement and set a council tax rate. The council will have had a chance to digest the budgets in front of them and have probably drawn their own conclusions. I was surprised to see that on the face of it, there is a lot of commonalities between the two budgets, but of course the substance is in the detail, but more importantly, the implementation plan that sits behind them. Through the transformation process, again and again, members of the public asked us not to take any savings from our road service. We received budget information telling us that the 2019 steady state value is £217 million. This means we need to spend at least £21.7 million above and beyond our normal roads budget allocation just to stand still. Our proposal is to invest an extra £3.6 million above and beyond our normal allocation. This will result in 2 first-time permanent patching squads at a cost of £1.4 million. A further revenue allocation of £200,000 will allow 2 additional drainage squads to undertake the necessary drainage works that will add longevity to our roads repairs. A further £2 million of capital will be spent on structural overlays, surface dressing, etc. This will have a positive effect on our roads infrastructure and start to address the aspirations of our local communities across our region. As part of our proposal, you will see an allocation of £400,000 towards the Triple R team. People of Dumfries and Galloway have benefited from this team being in place, and as a part of our economic recovery, it is essential we have every tool in the box to influence every possible resource, financial or otherwise, so we can put all our shoulders to the wheel to support our #1 priority, building our local economy. The Conservative Economy and Resources Spokesman will talk more about this leader as we go forward, so I would ask that you give him that opportunity, Councillor Johnston. He will talk about supporting small businesses, revitalising and regenerating our high streets, borderlands and so on. We spend more money as a council on our education system than any other single item. If our budget receives a majority support today, we will invest in our school estate, we will protect rural schools, and we will maximise the potential as an education authority from some of the advances we have learned from the pandemic. But again, more detail will come from the Deputy Leader in the part of his seconding of this motion. We have protected our social work budget in recognition of the important work our staff carry out and in recognition of the role they have and continue to play in the fight against the pandemic. Public transport has had a major hit and is under real threat. The Council's transport spokesman will cover our thoughts going forward in this, Councillor Andrew Wood. Again, if you would allow him to speak on that, Leader. Decriminalisation is another aspect we've put forward as a policy, and again, it's specific there in of our parking. That is, it's not specifically there within our budget proposal here today, but it's always been one of our policies, and I think we should adhere to that. And I think it's going back to the commonalities. Hopefully, we'll get some kind of agreement as the year goes on. I would like to say, so going back to a more personal local thing, I think Annan Harbour has been under-recognised over the years and needs to be recognised at a higher level. So, depending on what budget gets approved today, but ultimately, hopefully one way or another through the process, as you've outlined, will carry on through the year. That particular harbour, and it is a council-owned harbour, will receive the essential funding that it requires to go forward. The one question I will come back to, Leader, just in preparation, because it's not obvious within your budget proposal. You touch on it, it's there within the capital investment strategy, but the white sands, there's a lot of discussion going on. We've made it clear. So we've took advice. There's a legal process going on at the moment. So we've zeroed that. You have done the same as see. It's in the 10-year plan, not the 3 to 4 year plan. So that would indicate on the face of it that actually in real terms that project's gone in real terms for another 2 council terms at the earliest. So that's it gone. It's finished. But we're clear about that as a Conservative and Unionist group on the council. That is our stance. We need to understand exactly what the administration are thinking. So we'll come back to that. So I formally move our budget, Leader, and hopefully all Councillor Caribbean to come in.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Carruthers. Can you put the terms of your motion up? Are you able to share that, or somebody share that, or even maybe read it out to us? And can I also suggest you indicated a number of members who wish to speak. I would still ask those members to type speak in the chat function so that they can be called in the appropriate order. And I'll now call on Duke Fairbairn to second your motion.
Morning, Leader. Yes, if you can move that motion, I second that. Thank you.
Okay, you don't want to make a further submission then?
I'd like to echo Councillor Carruthers and thank Westminster for the extra money delivered throughout the UK, assisting all through this pandemic. So good morning all, and firstly I'd like to echo Ian as well in thanking all council staff for all the hard work, dedication and commitment over the last hard 13 months. So we need to invest heavily into our roads network, and we would do that. We were once the jewel in the crown of maintained services within Dumfries and Galloway. It's also paramount, it has been touched on, part of the administration budget, and it's a big thing. It's paramount that we support care and look after our staff, not just in a pandemic, but all the time. I think that's very much paramount. So we're going back on education now. So we need to work hard with our education department and schools to improve the way we deliver education and increase attainment, and point all towards a positive destination and work hard to address the poverty gap and retain young people within the region. By developing new industry and employment opportunities, in turn creating new job placements and innovative ways of working to attract and retain a younger workforce for the future. The current stage of Dumfries Learning Down 2 is overdue but very welcome, but we still need to lobby for more money to further upgrade our school estate throughout the region. We need to consider a large-scale tuition in the summer holidays, plus extended school hours. This would go some way in making up for lost classroom time, and summer school tuition is something we seriously need to consider. Academic progress amongst pupils, especially from disadvantaged backgrounds, has been significantly undermined by the closure of all our schools. We need to lobby harder for our area in terms of money for IT, remote learning, connectivity, rural isolation, to ensure we are further equipped for the future. Also, when I say our area, I mean Dumfries and Galloway. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Can I just ask you to confirm that your amendment is to agree the Conservative and Unionist budget, and you have nothing else in your amendment?
No, I agree the Conservative and Unionist budget. Thank you, Leader.
Yep, that's
thank
exactly
you.
what it is, Leader. Yep.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Scobie, followed by Councillor Johnson, Councillor Wood and Councillor Hislop. Okay, Councillor Scobie.
Thank you, Chair. And it's unusual, as the Socialist Group usually comes forward with an amendment, a budget that would recognise increased public services and increased in the number of jobs. And like the other speakers, I too would put on record from the Socialist Group our thanks to the hard-working public servants throughout this whole pandemic. And I would highlight that in the depot in Stranraer, where 6 operatives are now doing the work of 60 workers that were there going back years, which reflects the austerity and the cuts throughout the years that public services have suffered. So we are in unprecedented times. Throughout the year, people have suffered, and the pandemic has caused suffering, hardship, and we have seen the increase in poverty, particularly in child poverty. The budget proposals we have before us today, as has been said, they're similar in context, with no increase in the council tax, no reduction in services, no job loss. However, we are in emergency times, which require emergency actions. So we don't see this just as no increase in the budget. What we have put forward has been an addendum to both motions. We have asked both groups to accept an addendum where we are putting forward in the addendum a reduction in council tax of 3%. This is to be drawn on the 2.364 million that the Scottish Government has or will be reimbursing on the council, keeping to the 3% increase. So we are saying in the addendum that we should draw a further 3% from balances that are held in reserves, and we should be magnanimous in this, in matching the Scottish Government's 3% reimbursement. This would give people a real reduction in council tax, reflecting the suffering and hardship that has been caused by this pandemic. And we would ask the Labour SNP administration and the Tory group to accept the addendum on both their budgets, so that we reflect a real savings in the council tax, a reduction in council tax on this year. Again, Chair, I would seek clarification, and that is accepted under what you referred to as 2.27 as an addendum, not an amendment. We are not changing any of the budget proposals in how they are laid out. We are asking both groups to accept this as an addendum. We would seek governance opinion on that, please, Chair.
We have already done so. We've already sought governance opinion, indeed the Section 95 officer's opinion on that, and the Section 95 officer does not believe this to be a minor adjustment to the budget proposal. So it would not concur with 3.21 in agenda item 4. Can I also say that I would not accept it anyway? And this is because the council tax reduction scheme is in place to support individuals and families on low incomes towards reducing and eliminating council tax bills. Individuals and families in receipt of CTRS support would not benefit from this proposal, but instead the amount of CTRS funding being received by the council from the Scottish Government would be reduced. So it would have a financial consequence from that point of view as well. A reduction in council tax would provide a reduction to all council taxpayers rather than being focused on individuals and families who need support. A reduction in council tax would reduce the level of funding the council has available to support the real needs that you've indicated, and indeed to support our work on tackling poverty. And a reduction in council tax would have to be reversed in future years to avoid reduced funding available for public services on a recurrent basis. I am slightly surprised that a group describing themselves as a socialist group would be prepared to offer increased support to people with larger houses, because the more council tax you pay, the more you would actually get a benefit from this. And I don't actually see that as a particularly socialist proposal personally. So we will not be accepting that addendum. I don't know whether Councillor Carruthers wants to respond on behalf of the Conservatives on that.
Thanks, Leader. Well, so I took the advice as soon as, and Councillor Scobie and I have spoken about it. So the advice is identical to yourselves. The budget process was agreed in December 2020, as you've outlined earlier in your statement, and this is non-compliant with that particular process. I do think, Councillor Scobie, so I wouldn't accept it either, Willie, because we've been advised that it wouldn't be competent at this moment in time. It needs to be impact assessed, so on and so forth. But I still think that Councillor Scobie, and maybe we could get into this as the debate goes on, has a point in regards to smaller groups being able to put forward potential amendments on the day or as the year goes on. They should be able to influence the administrations, or whatever budget's being agreed, they should be able to have that chance. And that goes for all groups, Leader. We spoke about that briefly. So that's the only point. I couldn't accept it. Well, they would be advised otherwise that it would be incompetent in real terms. So I wouldn't accept it. But I do think you've got a valid point when it comes to being able to put forward addendums, amendments, and so on at the point of the budget setting time.
Thank you, Councillor Carruthers. And I'm aware that you asked a particular question about the capital investment strategy and the White Sands, and Councillor Wilson has offered to answer that question. This won't count towards his 2 minutes speech, but he is coming in order to answer your question and to provide an explanation.
Thank you, Leader. So from my understanding, Councillor Carruthers said in his words, he made it clear that the White Sands had been zeroed, which and also asked what the administration's position was on the White Sands. The administration's position on the White Sands has not changed. If Councillor Carruthers and the Conservatives' interpretation of the White Sands being zeroed, then I presume that he also means that the Newton Stewart Flood Protection Scheme, there's no money going to be allocated. The Langham Flood Protection Scheme, there's going to be no money allocated. We have taken an approach that is consistent with reporting to FPT committee. Obviously, there's a legal process currently underway in terms of the consultation on the White Sands. And what we are doing is we're allocating the resources to Langham and to the Newton Stewart Flood Protection Scheme because they're a little bit ahead of the process. Of course, this is a similar process we followed with Sunra, which is further ahead than the other three. So we will allocate money to the resources required for the White Sands Flood Protection Scheme once we're able to do so. Of course, there's currently a legal consultation underway on that, and the administration's position has always been that we will accept the outcome of any consultation that is underway. Obviously, when ministers approved it, we accepted that and moved forward, and we will accept the outcome of the current legal process that is underway. And we hope that in due course, we will be able to allocate the resources required for the White Sands Flood Protection Scheme and get that moving. But I think that we need to be absolutely clear. The capital investment strategy is a 10-year strategy. Any money that is allocated between now and 2031 will be spent. And at this moment in time, the administration's budget proposal and the Conservative budget proposal is identical in that respect, that at some point over the next 10 years, money will be spent on the White Sands Flood Protection Scheme, and that will progress. Hopefully that will be sooner rather than later, but of course the processes that are set out in law must be undertaken, and we will do that. And it appears to me that that is what the Conservative group intend to do too.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Thanks, Leader, for giving that update. But it's definitely not, I made it clear within the statement, that's not what the Conservative group intend to do. I've already said there is a legal process going on at this moment in time. We've zeroed, when I say zeroed, it should have been more informative. We've zeroed the potential revenue money that was being spent to work up that particular project. We've taken that out and used it exactly the same. So it's like for like, but until such time as the legal process is finished, we've been advised that it would be the wrong thing to do at this moment in time, but we have made it clear through our whole term of this council and previous actually that we don't support the particular projects that in front of us. Not something should be done to the White Sands, but not this project. But thanks for the clarity.
Right, thank you. Councillor Scobie has asked to come back, but actually I read out the standing orders and people are allowed to speak once unless they are answering a question. So I'm afraid he will not be able to come back. And I will call Malcolm Johnson, Councillor Malcolm Johnson.
Thank you, Leader, for letting me speak on this. I've been looking through your budget proposal, and as you've pointed out already, there is an awful lot of commonality. And I'm pleased to see that in your budget proposal, you recognise flexibility to respond to future challenges. There's a number of initiatives through there which I agree with strongly. I agree with the implemented the roads review, the 20-mile-an-hour zone, the decriminalised parking, something we've been talking about for an awful long time. Again, our town centres have changed probably irreversibly throughout because of this pandemic, and the 20-minute neighbourhood initiative is very good. It's something that should help to regenerate and repurpose our town centres, because that's what's going to have to happen. I think the days of large retail in the town centre are maybe not completely over, but near enough. And if we're going to go forward and we're going to achieve this, what I would like to see added, and we as a group would like to see added to your proposals, is a root and branch review of the planning department, whether we need increased resource or whether we need to change, because a key driver of economic recovery after this pandemic is going to be how we get building and construction up and running. And there is a perception that planning is a bit sticky and can be a bit of a delay to things. So I think we really need to have a serious look at that. And I think whether our budget's agreed or your budget's agreed, I appreciate you taking this on board, and through the committee structure at E&R, we have a look at what we need to do with that. I was very impressed with the simplified planning zones, so a further investigation of master plan consent over the next few months I think would be a good way forward. Also, we mentioned the core paths and the tourism. We need to be investing continually in tourism. But hopefully our tourist businesses are going to stay alive long enough to actually benefit from what could come from potentially what, if vaccination and everything works out, it could be a fantastic season going forward. But I accept that we do have to be flexible. We have to be agile. We're doing good work with Borderlands. The economic development and the R&R team have done a terrific job with administering the business grants. But I appreciate the difficulty, because at the moment we don't even know the demand for support. The Chancellor yesterday announced his support from UK government's going up to the end of September, so it looks like it's going to continue through the summer, and obviously it'll have to for ourselves as well. But equally, we're in a difficult position of not knowing what our budget's actually going to be. There's money transferred to Holyrood, and it is down to us to continue to lobby that Dumfries and Galloway get its fair share. But it's very pleasing to me that as an entire council, we seem to all be singing off the same page with us. So I would just like to add those extra little parts to that section that I think will help to get us back on our feet.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Johnson. And obviously, you know, the steps that we need to take to ensure economic recovery will be discussed over a period of time. And one of the reasons I think we've looked at this, establishing RRR subcommittee is to enable us to look at precisely at these types of things, what actually needs to be done to be able to help our region to recover. Other things, indeed, in terms of the resource and planning, much of planning legislation, and I think some of the clunkiness about planning actually comes from legislation, and there's been various attempts in Scottish Parliament to reform planning legislation, but it always seems to end up a bit of a dog's breakfast. But I think we do need to look at all these things in the round, and I hope that when we get the RRR subcommittee up, we will be able to give some serious consideration, make recommendations to service committees or full council, and have all these things thoroughly debated and discussed by elected members. And I think that, to me, is one of the reasons I am pleased that we've had to develop this process this time, because actually, in terms of taking policy development further, it's more democratic than just pushing all of the policy development templates through one meeting. This actually allows discussion, further discussion and reflection and scrutiny as we go forward. So we look forward to your contributions as we take those forward. Can I call Andrew Wood, please?
Thank you, Leader. The Conservative Group believe that with the present uncertainties of the COVID-19 and the long-term impact that it will have on public transport, coupled with the root and branch review on the Council future transport needs, which is expected to be completed by the end of May this year, that it would be unwise to commit extra monies to West Strands at this stage. However, with the immense pressure which is being put on the small team within West Strands and the missed opportunities of drawing down additional external funding, we believe that the additional staffing capacity of a person with bus expertise and another with technical skills would bring much needed support to West Strands at this present time, while also helping in succession planning and allowing both the review time to be completed along with the trends in public use on our services to recover to its new baseline. There is little doubt that there are people who urgently require public transport, but in what capacity and methodology used still needs to be ascertained. I would, however, like to take this opportunity in thanking the team within West Strands and all the volunteers who have continued to help deliver the much needed services on behalf of the Council and NHS. I would further like to thank the board members for keeping politics away from the board table. So thank you.
Right, thank you. Councillor Davison would like to respond to the issue about planning that Malcolm Johnson raised, and I see that Adam has also offered to respond to Councillor Wood's proposals. So can I bring in Councillor Davison?
Thank you, Leader. My apologies for getting things slightly out of order, because I think that otherwise this way of doing things is quite precise and structured, and I welcome that. It was to come back very briefly then to what Councillor Johnson is talking about, and I think there is something in that. I'm very conscious that we are about collectively to ask for a great deal of additional work over and above the huge amount of work that has been put in, as Councillor Johnson quite rightly reflects, for example, in processing millions upon millions of pounds of business support, for example. So I think perhaps it might be best taken forward on the basis of, in the first instance, a discussion on how such an examination could be focused on the immediate outcomes that we're looking at, which I have taken to be from his comments, predominantly focused around town centres. Leader, I absolutely take your point that we are very much controlled in what we are able to do by the legislation that's set down in the various Planning Scotland Acts. But equally, the experience of the last 13 months has demonstrated that planning can be flexible in response to serious and extreme circumstances, with various measures put in place, rapidly, which allowed flexibility to allow premises owners, for example, to make changes that would otherwise require planning permission in order to respond to the physical requirements of safe social distancing, for example. I think it would be beneficial for us to look at that further and get a clearer indication of what that sort of piece of work would be, and how we could link it to the key objectives in front of us. And I take it we are in broad agreement that one of those would be how we revitalise our town centres. So it might, I think, be best as a fairly short and focused piece of work concentrating on that particular goal. And if that is the case, I think the most sensible way forward in the first instance would be to have that discussion and work out what could be brought forward in a sufficiently short time scale that it actually have some benefit. I hope that as an answer to that point is helpful and useful. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. And Councillor Wilson wants to answer to Councillor Wood's point.
Thank you, Leader. I think just on Councillor Wood's point, obviously being a fellow West Trans Board member, there has been quite a lot of difficult conversations, and I don't necessarily disagree with the need for further resources in that area. And of course, that is something that the transformation programme is considering. I think it is worth pointing out that this council has secured external funding to fund an active travel officer for the next 3 years. Which I'm sure will be welcomed by everybody, and will be a welcome resource to a number of local key priorities. I think just one thing I would say is that we are more than happy to have discussions on what further resource might be required to ensure that we have a strong public transport network going forward. But there is no such proposals in the Conservative budget at present, so we would need to have further discussions on that, similar to a planning review. There's no proposals in the Conservative budget to allocate money to that or how that review would be carried out. So we really need to see the devil in the detail.
Thank you, Adam. And I've got Councillor Hislop.
There we go. Right, thank you, Leader. As you've already said, this is sort of unprecedented times we're in. We sat down to submit our budgets last week prior to either UK budget or Scottish budget actually being set. So a lot of this was a holding budget that was put in place. And hopefully through the UK and Scottish budget, there will be additional funds coming over the year. I welcome the fact that we are looking at, over the year, working up proposals to see how we can best spend any additional revenue funding that comes in to make sure that we can make the biggest impact on our region to take us out of this COVID-19 pandemic. I know we took some additional savings or efficiencies, but when we looked at them, there were digital advances that allowed us to take some of these. There were various options there whereby there were a couple of vacancies that haven't been filled that we were willing to take, and I think that's something that needs to be considered at this time. We also took one that I didn't think I would ever take, which was the verge maintenance, but with the working on the climate change emergency committee, that has sort of pushed me in the direction of actually accepting things like this. Can we make more biodiverse? And we'll get a slight saving from only taking one strip of cut down the road instead of two, so that'll be a carbon saving. I would like to, at this stage, I think a lot of what's been said has been said and don't need to repeat it, but I would like to repeat my thanks to Paul Garrett and his team for their help and me to bring together our budget proposals. I would also like to thank, on behalf of the Council, COSLA and the team that have negotiated on our behalf. And I think one of the things we should thank is Councillor McGregor. She actually represents Dumfries and Galloway well when she goes up to act as the finance spokesman, and I think that's an honour this council should recognise. Other than that, nothing further to say at this point.
Thanks, Councillor Hislop. And I see your contribution is more of an explanation of your own budget than a question on ours. Now, I now have a number of administration and other opposition councillors wanted to come in. So if it's administration councillors and they have a question, I will offer Councillor Carruthers either the chance to respond himself or to nominate somebody else to respond on behalf of the Conservative group. Okay, Councillor Driver.
Thanks very much, Leader. I hope you can hear me okay. First of all, I'm normally a sort of glass half full kind of person, and there's no doubt that last year has been difficult. But I do think the following year may well be just as difficult, and I speak on behalf of our staff and our third sector organisations, being the health and well-being elected member supporting that particular thing. And I'm really glad to see that both budgets have actually had, taken that into consideration, and thankfully have put some money towards the health and well-being of our staff. But with regards our staff over the last year, they have been magnificent, but also our third sector organisations have been magnificent as well. And my concern is that some of the third sector organisations are now getting stretched because their volunteers are getting tired, and the same some of our staff as well. And I think the organisations that I have worked with over the last year have been very thankful for our council support, whether it be financial or whether it be with manpower. The admin budget, of course, gives us the opportunity to respond accordingly and appropriately to scrutinise and challenge anything that comes up in the next year. And I hope that members would be content that that is actually probably the best way to go. I've found the meetings so far very inspirational in the way that people are actually talking, and I hope that the budget that we have put forward gives members the confidence that the issues that they are raising will be at least discussed and take forward. And I think supporting our budget, the administration budget going forward, I would suggest that would be the case, Leader.
Thank you. I also feel that our contribution is more in support of our budget than asking a question of the Conservatives. Can I call in then Councillor Jim Dempster?
Thanks, Leader. My contribution will be much along the same lines. I would like, first of all, if I may, pay tribute to the role you have played, Leader, during these very difficult and trying times. You provided a dignified and steadying hand, taking this council forward in a time of crisis, when some members, due either to legislation or advice from health professionals, were not able to contribute. You and a small team took forward this council in a very professional manner, and you deserve all the credit you're entitled to for that particular piece of work. Our staff have been mentioned, especially their flexibility, and I think that's important. And frontline service staff such as social work, education deserve praise, but so do every other member of staff within this council who have redeployed, upskilled and worked tirelessly, sometimes 7 days a week for weeks on end, with no complaints other than taking condolence or satisfaction in serving the wider community. In terms of a budget, devolved budget from the Scottish Government, UK Government, we have sustained years of cuts, something that I trust will now come to an end when there's a recognition of the value of local government and what we contribute to the well-being of the wider community. It would be something of a scandal and nothing less if staff were being credited for going beyond what would be expected of them, and at the same time concerned about whether or no they have job security in the years going forward. And it gives me a great deal of pleasure, Leader, to be able to be part of an organisation that for the first time in many years is offering a no cuts budget, something that should not be forgotten in these challenging times. And on a personal level, I remember well the horse trading that went on through the day and into the evening in years gone by in the back of our fag packet budgets that they have now vanished, and our budget team provide templates that are well thought out, well presented, and more importantly, they deliver for the whole of the region and addresses the change in local and regional requirements in this particularly trying time. and I will certainly support the administration budget when it comes to the voting that will no doubt take place later on. Thank you, Leader, for your time.
Thank you, Jim, and thanks for your kind words. Again, I think that was a statement in support of the administration budget. Now, I'm now coming to Councillor Brodie, and it may be that Councillor Brodie has questions for both the administration and the Conservatives group, in which case I would intend to offer answers from both the administration and the Conservative group. Councillor Brodie.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. It's good that we're not having any cuts this year. It is some comfort at a difficult time when councillors and communities and businesses are looking at the ravages of COVID and say, how can we regenerate Dumfries and Galloway to get to where we were before and perhaps exceed that in the future? So I've just got looking for some reassurance from both budgets. Obviously, towns are looking to regenerate. They've got great plans across the region, and they're wanting support to develop these plans, so they tap into other funding like Borderlands and South of Scotland Enterprise, and they're looking for support for the council. Just need assurance that support will be there to develop their town plans. And obviously, as a council for Annandale and South, I've got our community in Annan has got special concerns because we're still trying to recover from the loss of 500 jobs plus pennies, and the Conservative speaker did mention Ann Harbour as a project going forward that would be worthy of support. And I would just like comment from the admin in that we've got a very hard-working community group, consulted with the local community, come up with a really ambitious plan to invest £4.5 million over the next 5 years, and to create jobs and bring prosperity to the town again. So this is very important to myself as councillor and probably other local councillors in Annan. So what assurances can we get on what support we'll get from the administration? We have been successful in getting £98,000 from the Community Land Fund to buy properties at the harbour and the Minister's Merse there, which is an important part of a strategic part of land. We are lucky to get some officer support with our project, but obviously that's been cut back as resources are targeted at supporting businesses in the short term with the grants. Quite often these projects across the region, they just need a bit of prime funding to get the ball rolling and get other funders on side. So just looking what assurance and help we can look forward to in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. I'll bring in Councillor Davidson to respond to that, and I'll then ask Councillor Carruthers if he wants to make any further response to your issue. Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, Leader, and I recognise that Councillor Brodie's a forthright and consistent advocate for Annan Harbour. If I can maybe take it as an example, because he points to an issue which he alludes to himself that I think is something we need to look at seriously in terms of supporting community-led economic regeneration over the coming year. I suspect that all of us will have examples either in our wards or in the immediate vicinity, if not actually within our wards, where a community group has reached a point with a proposal where they require extra capacity, and generally speaking, or very commonly, that extra capacity will come at a cost. I can think of an example in my own ward. I can think of examples right across the region, as members would expect, given my interest in economic development and regeneration. I do think that there is a very legitimate role for our council to provide resource to support the capacity of community groups to take a project from a good idea to the point where it's capable of attracting, in some instances, quite substantial levels of external funding. This has been done successfully in the past. that there are projects which are ongoing now. There are some which have been somewhat delayed by the impacts of the pandemic, and will therefore all be at various different levels of readiness and preparedness at this point. I think what we need and should therefore form part of our work on regeneration and supporting community-led regeneration over the coming year, the final year of this council term, is to look at a framework by which we can allocate resource to support projects which have reached that stage, that have an evidence need for that capacity to take them to the point where they can make the bids for more substantial external funding. I believe that's a piece of work that should, I think, in the first instance, be taken forward through the E&R committee, so that members can look carefully at the criteria for it, so that it can be applied fairly and equally across the region. But the member cites Annan Harbour as a good example, and it's one I would expect we would wish to consider. I am also equally conscious that members right across the virtual chamber will no doubt, having heard this, have ideas in their own minds about the community organisations that they are most familiar with and where they have got to with various projects in their own wards. But I think that would provide us with a policy-led, structured process for providing that support to help these community-led regeneration projects to take their projects to the next level, and ideally to a point where they can lever in potentially very significant sums of external funding. One final point on that, Leader, and I hope it has been helpful, is to say that I do think we should look carefully at the role that South of Scotland Enterprise could play in working with us to that end. I am not suggesting that to get the council off the hook. I said at the beginning of this that I believe we have a role in this matter. I also recognise that economic development is their core business. We established a Team South of Scotland approach to the response to the pandemic, working with SOS and with Scottish Borders Council. I think that same approach should also apply to how we tackle the challenges and opportunities of recovery and renewal. But I hope that answer has been helpful. I believe this is something that we should look at sympathetically and carefully, do so on a structured and policy-based process, so that whether it's Annan Harbour or it's something in my own ward or in Stranraer or wherever that happens to be, we can provide that assistance where a good case has been made. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Crothers, did you want to come back in and anything else you'd said on that?
I just, briefly, for the sake of expediency, Annan Harbour, I'll add slightly to that, so I have covered it already. Councillor Brewer, you're well aware, it took us a number of years arguing at committee with the council to get that recognised as a council asset in real terms, so it wasn't being funded through the common good. The harbour was depleting the Annan Common Good Fund a piece of knots, but we won that argument, so the council has recognised it, and I still think it's under-recognised. And the council, the proof of the pudding will be in eating, as I said, the implementation plan. So whatever budget gets agreed today, I think has been a reasonable process, been outlined by the Leader already. It's in the papers as well in regards to how, that's why I've not been explicit about it within our own budget proposal, because we would align ourselves to that, is that we agree that through the committee structure going forward, whether it's finance, procurement, transformation, another service committee, or has to come back to full council, the extra allocations of money that are coming, whether it's through the COVID recovery, whether it's through Borderlands. Annan has clear links from the harbour right up through to the High Street. That's identified within the Annan Master Plan, and the placemaking may well have it even through Borderlands. But there's I know they've got there's positive conversations going on with South of Scotland Enterprise. That's, as Rob's already alluded to. But for the rest of the assurances that you're looking for, that will come out through the year. That will come out through the implementation stage. All these assurances will be given factually then. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. I've now got Councillor Doogie Campbell.
Thank you, Leader. I think it's noteworthy that action on climate change underpins the budget of the administration. And I'm pleased, obviously, that additional funding of £185,000 has been included in the administration budget, and in fairness, the Conservative budget, which I think demonstrates the cross-party approach to the 12-point plan. But that 185k is very important in terms of ramping up the ability of the climate change team to monitor progress on carbon reduction measures across the whole council, and of course to deliver on the citizens panel, which will meet our aspirations and obviously the expectations of people who live and work in Dumfries and Galloway. I'm also really pleased that in the political statement there's a commitment to finding resources to progress work on the biodiversity forestry and woodland strategy, which are of course very important aspects of the 12-point plan. And my question for Councillor Carruthers is that obviously I'll be hoping that the administration budget prevails today, but will the Tory group support the additional resource in due course for the biodiversity and forestry and woodland strategies?
Thank you, Doug. Thanks, Leader. I'll pass that straight to Ivor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hislop.
Chair, when they come forward, it'll be something that we'll consider appropriate at the time. There will be additional resources required for the biodiversity and forestry plans. So, yes, that would be considered favourably at the time.
Thank you, Councillor Hislop. Councillor Jeff Lever.
Thanks, Leader. Yeah, I too would like to pay tribute to all their council staff, but especially the education staff and the pupils and their parents and their carers, which has been hopefully a uniquely difficult year. And I think the experience of home learning probably makes everybody wish to return to full-time schooling in a safe fashion. I very much welcome the commitment to, in both budgets, to the school's virtual desktop technology, which will benefit schools right across the region, and also the Dumfries Learning Town Phase 2, which is long overdue. A third of our pupils have been identified as having additional support needs, and this number continues to grow. It's likely to be exacerbated as a result of the hiatus in education and in young people's social development arising from the COVID lockdown. I therefore strongly advocate for any additional spending to be used to accelerate the review of additional support for learning. And this will also contribute to closing the attainment gap as identified by Councillor Fairbairn, which undoubtedly has considerably widened due to COVID. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, and I think that's something that would be cross-party agreement of the need to address the problems which have been exacerbated by the experience of home learning and the increased disadvantage indeed that some people suffer because of the mechanisms which have had to be put in place. I've now got Councillor David James.
Good morning, Leader. Last year, as I remember, I was no platformed in midstream, so I'll crack on today to avoid getting Jackie Weavered. You mentioned the decriminalisation of parking. Now, Malcolm Johnson called for that in 2017 because he identified that we were in a crisis there, and your abrogation and ignoring that has caused some irrevocable damage to the high street, and I hope you'll try and redress some of that failing going forward and finally get around to looking at it, or who knows, maybe even implementing it. I've looked at the budgets. Both seem to support the flawed climate strategy. Both support the counterproductive well-being waste of money. Single cutting of verges, that's a good thing for the environment. I like that. Neither of the budgets will introduce compulsory redundancy, the sort of thing you actually need if you were prepared to do some proper restructuring. Both rightly support the young person's employability. That's a great moment to lead by example. both have response, renewal and recovery in there, and who knows, we might even properly address emergency preparedness going forward in a way that we didn't take seriously before. We've had a warning now with the mini emergency of COVID. In the end of the day, it seems to boil down to whether one is for or against potholes. I'm against potholes, so I'll be supporting the Conservative budget. But I'd like to, in the meantime, ask 3 questions. And my first question is for Willie Scobie, because he's a great champion of roads, and I'd like to ask him, since the only difference seems to be the Conservatives' support for road improvement.
I'm sorry, because to just stop you there, Councillor Scobie has not got a budget in and therefore can't answer a question on roads. Your questions need to be directed to the administration proposals or the Conservative and Union's proposals.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for that. It's actually rhetorical. Let Willie Scobie reflect on his position. Is he just a champion of motorways for Irish juggernauts, or is he for roads in general, in which case he could support the Conservative proposition here? My second question is for Rob Davidson. In 2008, the Scottish banks were bailed out by the UK in the way that the UK could do and an independent Scotland couldn't. We've now had massive borrowing from the UK, whether you like it or not, in a way that the Scottish government could never do. And technically, of course, the Scottish government could never actually introduce quantitative easing. So they just wouldn't have the tools in the kit to deal with this, even if countries had confidence in Scotland, which they wouldn't. So why is it that we can't have an economic impact assessment on the threat of independence? We need that. The threat is over the horizon. My last question is for you, the leader, and that is, I've seen here in the budget that our number 1 priority is the economy. And again, you're saying that you want to be inclusive. And yet you draw exclusively from what is a very shallow talent pool, particularly when it comes to economic activity. And why wouldn't you, given that today Ian Carruthers has been exceptionally friendly towards you, why wouldn't you reach out and take one from his team, perhaps the entrepreneurial bright spark, which is Pauline Drysdale, and make her head of economic revival? Why wouldn't you do that? Why would you just choose to go on the same way you do and not optimize for economic improvement? So those are my 3 questions, one of which can't be answered by Willie. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think actually the other ones are not questions on the budget. They're questions actually on the political issues. I don't really think, I shall, Councillor Davidson is prepared to answer that. I've seen Councillor Wilson will answer your question on criminalisation. And on the issue where you're trying to say we are being exclusive, no, we are not being exclusive. The whole point of the structure of our budget proposals, in particular in the political document, is to enable elected members to take part in the decisions and the scrutiny and the discussion. And if people have got good ideas to whether to bring them to committee or to bring them indeed to the RRR subcommittee, we will be very happy to consider them. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Wilson first to answer the decriminalisation point, and Councillor Davidson to answer your other point, although I don't actually consider that to be about the budget itself. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Leader. I would completely agree with you. I think we're here today to discuss a budget, not to discuss the 2008 financial crash. However, spent a lot of time at university studying that particular crash. I'm more than happy to have a discussion at another time, particularly the decriminalisation of parking. I think this administration has been quite clear since the get-go that we always felt that it was the responsibility and the duty of Police Scotland, and we have repeatedly made that case. Although we appreciate that actually that we are probably losing that argument, and there's a need to consider decriminalisation of parking. I know that my Labour colleagues in the Scottish Parliament tried to actually just get a blanket decriminalisation across Scotland, although unfortunately that wasn't taken up in consideration of the Transport Bill and now Transport Act of 2019. So this administration is demonstrating that actually we appreciate that while our position is very much that this is a duty of Police Scotland, and we welcome some of the moves locally in some of our town centres by local police to actually make sure that traffic offences are picked up on. We appreciate that actually we are going to have to look at this, and what our proposal would be is to actually recognise that our town centres are not filled with cars at this moment in time. There's also a need to make sure that anything that we do supports our local businesses, supports the creation of jobs, and supports the absolute survival of local businesses. And also any proposal that we bring forward for decriminalisation of parking. Councillor David James referred to a proposal that was in the Conservative budget a number of years ago. That is based on the level of traffic and the level of parking 3-4 years ago. And actually, I think some of the figures were actually even further earlier than that. So we have to appreciate that things, you know, I think it's fair to say everything has changed as a result of COVID. We are more than happy to consider decriminalisation of parking. There's the demand from communities for our council to be prepared to implement provisions in the Transport Act of 2019 on pavement parking. That would require the decriminalisation of parking, so we are willing to consider that. But part of that case to Scottish ministers will need to be that we have a sustainable plan to, first of all, decriminalise it and enforce going forward. Now, part of that sustainable plan needs to come from knowing actually what the situation is going to be. Are our town centres going to be as busy? Are we going to see as many cars parked in our town centres carrying out offences? So we need to know what that picture is like, and that is why we're committing today to bring forward that work and to start that process of decriminalisation, but make sure that it reflects what is happening on the ground and what is happening as a result in response to the COVID pandemic.
Right, thanks, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Davison has offered to answer Councillor James's point, but I do not intend this budget meeting, which should be about the relative merits of the two budgets in front of the elected members, to be diverted into a discussion about the Constitution. Councillor Davison.
Thank you, Leader. I will consider myself appropriately warned. I merely offer to answer the question since it would be rude not to do so. Councillor James talks more about the Constitution than I do, which is curious and interesting. But he will perhaps allow, and I'm sure other members would agree, that I have been rather busier with the pressing business of support for business during the pandemic and with assisting in the direction and creation of a genuinely broad-based and inclusive economic strategy for the south of Scotland, that is to say Dumfries and Galloway and Scottish borders, through the new Regional Economic Partnership and its Regional Economic Strategy. Doesn't particularly change my view on what I think ought to happen so far as the future of this country is concerned. What I will say is that there is a point and a time and place for this debate. I am delighted to have it with Councillor James, although it is not today, but I do think that he has at least acknowledged in his question that the time for that is coming sooner rather than later, and I for one welcome that and look forward to it. But it is not the matter for today, as you rightly say, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I call Councillor Nicholson?
Thank you, Leader. Just a couple of comments first. One of them is regarding the meeting chat room. I believe that it was not a vehicle to carry out further discussion of things that have already been discussed in the meeting. And this is especially when I can only type 2 words a minute. So I wouldn't be able to catch up on that. The other comment is that on the road verges cutting this budget, to me, it does raise a number of safety concerns. This is for pedestrians, especially when the roads, in a good way, is being used more and more by families walking. And so I'm pleased that there's not going to be any cuts in our budget for that reason, if that reason alone. Councillor Cridders talked about adding longevity by investing more in road service. I'd be interested if he could therefore explain why the Tory budget only invests extra money in road service for 1 year. That surely isn't adding longevity, unlike the allocation over a longer term in the administration budget proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Carruthers, do you want to respond to that or hand it to one of your colleagues?
No, that's all right. I'll take that one, Leader. Thank you. You touched on it earlier. This is a 1 year budget we're agreeing today. That's why it's in for 1 year. If we would apply the 3-year methodology, it would be 10.8 million, I think it is, we would be applying. That would go on in future years. The cutting of the grass, the roadside verges, what we would intend to do, if our budget gets agreed, and the details are not there, but we would actually, as part of the further funding that's been spoken about, would come forward through the COVID and recovery process, we would apply funds at a local level, whether it's a community council or community group, and I'll use a local example in my ward as a particular case. So between Ruthwell and Clansfield, all the members there get a number of complaints in regards to, in the summertime, it's a 60-mile-an-hour road, and it doesn't get cut. It gets cut at the visibility, but it doesn't get cut going down there. So it's walking to get to the bus stop, as well as dog walkers. So when a vehicle comes along, it's so narrow, it makes it difficult and brings up safety issues. Well, it takes forever, to say the least, to try and get the council to go forward and cut that particular piece of grass. We would implement a plan that, okay, we'd allocate a degree of funds to whether, let's say, a community council, community group. They could then take on, hire on a local farmer. He would cut that strip of grass. It's done immediately with immediate effect. So from a safety perspective, we think that would be a good initiative. I have to recognise that detail is not within our process, but Ivor's already touched the fact that the biodiversity, longevity in regards to roads, like I said, we've kind of touched that. But in order to remove water from once works, usually what causes the potholes in the first place is standing water, and the wear between the tyres and the friction between the movement of water creates a pothole, and that's because the drainage isn't being kept up to speed. So when you remove the water, that you apply longevity at that point. You've got to do too, otherwise that piece you've just repaired, piece of road you've patched or repaired, it just comes back within a matter of weeks or months, and we see that all the time. So that's where the longevity part comes from in particular, Leader. Thank you. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Councillor Carruthers. Councillor Sean Marshall.
Thanks, Chair. I've got an angry dog in the background at the moment, but hopefully he'll be quiet in a minute. First of all, I'd really just like, and I think many have said, I'd like to thank all the staff in the council for their work over the last year, and indeed probably the diversity of many of them, adapting to new temporary roles. But my reason for commenting is really just to support and commend the administration budget, but I'd like to maybe focus in on two areas of that budget. So under the capital investment strategy, we have committed an indicative capital investment allocation of 13.6 million to Borderlands at least over the next 10 years. Now, this is to deliver, I think, an important long-term suite of transformational projects across our region. And this includes two current projects at the moment, most importantly in two of our most important economic gateways to Dumfries and Galloway. That is the Stranraer Marina project in the west and the development of the Chapel Cross site project in the east, with the potential of thousands of new jobs for this region as per the strategic business cases. But these are just current examples of a suite of transformational projects that will have a major, significant and positive economic impact within Dumfries and Galloway. And more importantly, this administration is committed to Borderlands, and we are in it for the long haul, and we need to be. Not only do we need to invest, though, in capital, but we also have to ensure that we have the resources and appropriate skill sets in-house within the council workforce to deliver these projects over the next 10 years, and we are committed to that. The second point is I'm also proud of this administration's ongoing commitment in the budget to tackling poverty and inequality in our region. And would like to applaud the work of our fantastic and dedicated officers who have the responsibility for delivering this priority for our council. The implementation of the universal credit by this Tory government and the impact of COVID over the last year has seen unprecedented levels of people in poverty. And I know firsthand, and I know many of my Labour councillor colleagues know, because we've been on the front line over the last year, volunteering for third sector organisations such as the Food Train and Anna New Start Recycle. And never before has demand been greater for organisations like these and the services they provide by the vulnerable and needy. So I welcome this administration's ongoing support and commitment to tackling poverty and inequality in our region. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. I know they understand the problem with the dog. I have a similar one. Councillor Katie Hagman.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to come in and speak to our council administration budget. I've not got a specific question to the Conservatives. However, I did want to speak to our political document, of which I have got in front of me and of which I am exceedingly proud of. As Councillor Davidson said, this is my first time leading the SNP group within the budget process, and it has been a learning curve, like everything within this job. And I just wanted to reiterate what a privilege it is to be an elected member of Dumfries and Galloway Council. I think each and every one of us in this virtual chamber has to sometimes just take a step back and realise that we are here for the entire region. We are here to represent the public, and with our budget process, I think we have to have an open dialogue. We have to be flexible, especially at this point in time. It's been an extraordinary year and we do have a bumpy road ahead. I would also reiterate what has already been said in terms of our council staff and the people across Dumfries and Galloway. It has been extraordinary how incredible our population has been, how they've come up and they've supported people across the region. Specifically our council staff, I'm blown away by the commitment of our staff to the people and serving the people within our region. So there's been a lot of discussion, and I think this is exactly the reason why we've gone the way that we have. In a sense, we've got, instead of a programme for government, we've got our programme for council. We've been very clear, we've been very open that these are going to be setting the strategic direction of the council. But that doesn't mean to say that this is a fixed term. We're open and we will be having these discussions, and quite rightly too. Every single member within this virtual committee, within the council, has to have the opportunity to feed into this process, and that is what we're essentially being prepared to do. I'm not going to talk about the specific issues of our budgets because there's all these headline figures. There's a lot of similarities, absolutely. But what I would go on to say is that our budget proposal, our document that we provided, is combating our 5 priorities. There's been a lot of talk about our #1 priority of building the economy, and of course that is hugely important. But we also have providing the best start for our children in life, of which our budget has put in real allocations for. We're also looking to protect the most vulnerable within our communities, of which we're committed to do. We're also looking to be an inclusive council, and we're also looking to respond to the climate emergency that we're facing. Each one of these 5 priorities we have covered within our political document. So, as I say, I'm not going to go into the sort of specific minutiae of the detail. I think it's really important that we all recognise the privilege we're in. We all work together. We will be working flexibly. There will be adaptations that we have to make. And I think it's really imperative that we all work collaboratively in order to achieve what we're looking forward to. One point I would say, and it is disappointing that we have got very little detail to discuss in terms of the Conservatives administration budget proposal. And I am slightly baffled by Ian Carruthers' point of he's only put in a 1-year allocation for the roads, but yet there's 3-year allocations on other aspects of our budget. So, you know, I'm confident that the council administration budget is being set out in a clear, concise way. It gives us the framework for moving forward, and it's certainly something that I'm very proud to be speaking to today. So thank you, Leader, for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor Hagman. Councillor Ross Surtees.
Thank you very much. I seem to be. Oh, there we go. So I just want to use my time briefly to support Councillor Lever's comments about the education and learning of our young people and children. I'm not going to repeat everything that everybody has said about what an unprecedented time that we're living through, because we have rehearsed this over and over again. But we have approached the crisis in a very innovative and positive way, and it has been showing a lot of strengths for our staff, our parents and our children. But I would like to see the extra money coming in to support additional support for our special needs pupils. So I would like to support that. But on top of that, I think that the pandemic and the experience of our children is going to cause a huge amount of mental health difficulties. So I would like to work collaboratively with our partners and across the council to support everybody that has been affected and have experienced extra difficulties during this time. I'd also just like to acknowledge that some of the innovation that has happened during the pandemic has been the need to use innovative practices in learning, such as outdoor learning. And I'd just like to give an acknowledgement to the work that's going on with a group who are going to create a strategy for outdoor learning. And that has been proved to directly help children with mental health difficulties, and it directly supports attainment. I'd also just like to acknowledge that our budget is very clearly not going to meddle with any numbers of teachers. So that's a very positive thing. Thank you very much, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Surtees. Can I bring in Councillor Jane Maitland?
Thank you very much indeed, Leader. I think much has been said about the past, and very briefly, I think that we need to say that 15 months ago, the events of 2020 would have been the plot of an improbable movie. There's been good, bad and ugly, and these budgets reflects the response to these events. The virus itself, with baleful effects upon our lives, has provided tremendous shocks to corporate systems. It's dealt blows to mental health for our people, and we have had increased stress. Lockdowns have been bad for individuals, and we have discovered, as Councillor highlighted, hitherto unrecognised needs. Worry gnaws at business people, and the self-employed have been extremely hard hit. All these are becoming known to us, and our duty is to reach out to the less visible members of our society, Dumfries and Galloway, who will continue to need help over this new financial year. But there are good aspects, Leader. I think, as you have pointed out as well, we've seen staff doing sterling work outside, well outside their normal role. And I do commend members of staff for having grasped the nettle, taken up the challenge and moved forwards and helped us. And unimaginable possibilities have also been there through Zoom and Teams. Now, it's not a line in the budget, administration budget, but I wonder maybe you might like to comment on how you actually intend to capture the gains that have been made, and how we will resource and understand what we can do with the changes that have been made so we don't lose them going forward. I want to make a few budget-specific comments. Councillor Surtees talked about children's services, and I'm absolutely with her on that. We've all agreed on the merits of needing to boost spending on children's services. Targeted and tailored support for families means that they can, with a very little extra help, bring up their children to be responsible, successful and confident individuals. And goodness me, don't we all benefit if we can achieve that for our children. We also recognise that the 12-point plan is extremely ambitious, and by 2025, that's very close to when we will be expected to have delivered on our promise. As a question, does the administration intend to build on the work? We've put £185,000 extra into this, but can you see yourselves in the future building on that and going forward? I have a question also for the Conservatives. We noted the Conservative proposal to reduce the funding for the library book stock. With great respect, we think that the events of the past year point to rather a different way of working. The saving would, I think, probably be much better employed in advertising and marketing this particular service. It's underused and underexploited. We can and we should change that for the benefit of everybody. It's free. We should be explaining to people how to access a modernised service such as we have got. And we should learn about and remove the barriers that people have in accessing it. Leader, there is very little that divides the budgets, as people have pointed out. We welcome the emphasis on core path networks, 20-mile-an-hour limit zones, the towns and community regeneration. And I'm grateful for the response by the Deputy Leader about community regeneration, and with respect as an example that Annan Harbour has in that. I think also we notice that the roads is taken as an indicative spend over 3 years. I think that's appropriate because I think it gives the service at least an opportunity to plan forward. And I do welcome that the administration has put that in there. It's quite unusual for me to say that, but I think even I realise that we have got to spend more money on the roads. So, Deputy Leader, the independent group stands ready to play its part responsibly in the coming time of recovery, and I thank you for this time.
Thank you, Councillor Maitland. Councillor Wilson has offered to come in to answer some of your points about the assets and so on, and then I'll ask Councillor Carruthers if he wishes to answer your question to the Conservatives or to nominate a colleague to do so. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Maitland, for those questions. I think, first of all, on some of the learning from COVID, and obviously, this very meeting is a recognition of the fact that things have changed, and indeed everything has changed. And I'm sure that many of us are having conversations with friends, with family, with colleagues in the council and colleagues in other workplaces about actually what does the workplace look like after COVID. I think that there are two main aspects to this. First of all, the Economy and Resources Committee will be considering a refreshed council asset plan at some point in the near future. If it's not already on the forward business plan, it will be very soon. Obviously, there is changes to the way of working, and therefore that will have an impact on the level of council assets that we require. But I think it's also worth bearing in mind that in the administration is committed to continue the transformation programme. And even before the COVID pandemic, a whole stream of that work in the transformation programme was about actually how can we reduce fuel costs by making the most of virtual and remote ways of working and reducing that travel. Now, I think that during the pandemic, we have largely achieved that. And it is about actually making sure that we build that into future ways of working. But of course, we want to take our staff with us, and we want to make sure that working practices suit and work with and for our staff. And we will make sure that appropriate reporting comes forward, first of all, to Economy Resources Committee in that particular instance of council assets, but across all council committees on these changes to the way of working. I think it is very fair to say that we do have an ambitious set of targets for our climate change action plan, but I think that everybody, or at least the majority of us, will agree that that ambition is required because we have committed and put in place our climate emergency declaration. And essentially, the time is now. If we don't do it now, it will be too late. So our focus is very much on a lot of good work that we have already done. We have looked at, we have essentially decarbonised our entire pool car fleet. We are allocating this money within the budget today, in addition to all that work that we've already done. But of course, we will be doing everything we can as part of recovery to make sure that tackling climate change and reducing carbon emissions is at the heart of that. And our budget plans today will make sure that we also take that leadership role across the region. I think that the Council has played its part as part of the COVID response, along with our public sector partners. I think that we can do that, and this administration believes that we can do that similar role in helping our region to respond and to make sure that we tackle the climate emergency. And just finally, on your point on roads, I would entirely agree. I think it is appropriate that we make sure we have the resources and the skills we require in our council to make sure that we fix our assets, particularly our roads assets, well the first time, and that we do that. And I appreciate your support for that approach.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Carruthers, do you or one of your colleagues want to answer the point about the libraries?
Councillor Hislop will answer that. The roads thing, I suppose it was to yourselves, but I've made my view clear in regards to that. 21.7 million we should be spending, not 800,000.
Okay, Councillor Hislop.
Thank you, Leader. With regard to the libraries, I think this last year has shown that there is a move to more digital ways of working. The library service is important. That's why we've left £24,000 in there to actually buy new books. And with the improvement in our library management service digital platform, we can move stock round about the area, and this will allow for the supply of new literature to the various places when required.
Thank you, Councillor Hislop. Councillor Tommy Sloan.
Councillor Sloan's left the meeting, Leader.
Okay, well, if he comes back before the end of the meeting, I'll bring him back in at that point. Councillor Stephen Thompson.
Thanks, Leader. I'm pleased to see the investment and commitment to family early intervention over 3 years with children and family social work. That's on page 10 of our budget proposal document, page 14 of the papers, and then Councillor Maitland's already referred to this, which I welcome. I think we've long understood the importance of targeting our resources as effectively as possible to support the most vulnerable as early as possible, and this will make a difference. But again, as Councillor Maitland alluded to, we're kind of in the script of an unthought of movie, as it was a year ago, and we have to recognise that the business case for that support in our budget was in train before we started to see the full impacts of COVID-19. So I think we need to make the most of this funding now, but recognise that the ongoing pressures and the projected challenges that still lie ahead for our social work staff and all our partners in social care services will need to be addressed as we go forward. And I expect we'll see papers come to committees in the coming months to deal with exactly that. On a ward level, I'm sure it won't go unnoticed that on page 6 of our budget document, I think it's page 10 in the papers, it recognises the specific issue for small schools, where the school roll can fluctuate just above and below the 25 pupil number. And obviously that causes great concern and uncertainties for those school communities in being able to confidently plan ahead on a stable footing. It may seem like a small measure, but the impact this concern has on small rural communities is very significant and affects, the wider community as a whole. So I hope this provides comfort to those constituents in my ward who've come to me, and across the region, of course, to those schools who'd be affected, because the concerns do get raised, and parent councils and community councils and community meetings alike often bring them up. So I'm glad we're now mitigating against this, and this is a policy we can refine and review through our transformation work. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor David McKee.
Thanks, Chair. Just following on for Councillor Thompson, actually, just give you some figures regarding the amount of work and funding that's being provided to social work over the last period. Over the next 3 years, an additional 535,000 has been for early intervention work with children and families and social work, and another 70,000 for 3 years of additional commission services with the third sector. This funding was sought to try to alleviate family crisis, and given what children and families have been going through this past year, it's critical that we know about these things and we're prepared for responding. Just for example, in 2019, social work staff were dealing with 1,613 children. In 2020, that has risen to 1,783, and no doubt since then it's increased as well. And family support staff, their work has risen from 7,806 in 2019 to 8,844 in December last year. And these figures are very unlikely to reduce very soon. So these are figures and work that we've got to keep an eye on over the next period, and it's not going to be easy. But we need, as already been commented on, we need to thank the social work staff and the volunteers from other departments in the council who volunteered to work in social work, that they've provided great services, and I'm sure it's well appreciated by the customers out there, if you like to put that name on them. But thank you all very much for what you've done. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McKee. Now I've got Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Drysdale and Councillor Wilson all wanted to make contributions, and Councillor Wilson has answered questions, but he hasn't yet made a contribution, so he's entitled to come in. If I'll ask, is Councillor Sloan back yet, or?
I don't believe so, Peter.
No, we don't. Yeah. Okay. We'll continue with Councillor Andy Ferguson, and then I'll call him at the end after Councillor Wilson in case he's returned at that point. Councillor Andy Ferguson.
Thanks very much, Leader. I'm referring to page 12 of the papers about the youth guarantee. What I'm particularly pleased to see there is that the job placements will be created across council services and social care. Now that actually supplements the extra resources already put into social care by the Health Social Care Partnership. In a service area, we're very much unsung heroes. We've been doing frontline work right through the pandemic. But I think for me, that what it does here is it sends a very clear message to youngsters that there is a career in social care. It's not somewhere where you go if you can't get a job. By putting in job placements in there, we're bringing in the next generation of social care workers, showing them that there's a career pathway, and starting at the real roots of the organisation and getting new growth. So that's not the only way I'm commending the administration budget, but it's one I'd just like to highlight for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Pauline Drysdale.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to reiterate my appreciation to all council employees during this difficult period that we've been going through. Leader, I'd like to acknowledge also the investment in Dumfries Learning Town Phase 2 in the budget. The future of our smaller and more rural communities across D&G going forward will largely depend on the schools estate, our infrastructure, investment in tourism, the dynamic transformation of our town and the dynamic transformation of our town centres. Gillian Bryson and her team kindly offered myself and my fellow ward councillors the time to discuss the much needed capital investment in Kirkcudbright Academy. With the dynamic and rapid developments and improvements in new technology, largely down to COVID, the interior and exterior of the school's estate will change. As Councillor Surtees alluded to, this actually gives us a huge opportunity and chances to innovate and ensure that schools meet the needs of all our children from all backgrounds and with all sorts of difficulties. Can I be assured by this administration, if your budget's approved, that our rural schools will not be ignored or left on the back burner going forward? Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. And yes, of course, we will give you that assurance that all young people, all children, young people deserve the opportunity to learn in a good environment. And although at the moment we are concentrating, I think, on allowing pupils to be able to access subjects which they might not otherwise be able to do, the fabric of buildings is also important, and we will continue to invest in that, and we do in fact invest in that. It comes up to the Education Committee fairly regularly about more minor investments maybe in some of the schools. Obviously there maybe need to be a programme of investment, of more significant investment in some schools, and obviously that does have to be brought into the capital investment strategy. Can I bring in Councillor Adam Wilson?
Thank you, Leader. And I would just like to, along with others, thank officers who have supported the budget process. It's been a long and difficult process this year, but I think that the production of 2 different budget proposals shows that it has worked. And I also want to join other colleagues in thanking staff across our council and the wider health and social care partnership who have went above and beyond during this COVID pandemic. Also want to thank yourself, Leader, for your kind comments earlier, but I think it's fair to say we've had a team approach to developing the administration's budget, and I am very confident with the proposals that we have produced. I think one thing that is clear in the administration's budget is that we are acknowledging the flexibility that is going to be required. Our council has been flexible over the last 12 months, and we will continue to do so. And we have acknowledged a number of areas where we are keen to focus on as our policy priorities going forward. I think Councillor Hagman referred to as our sort of programme for council. I suppose it's also the sort of equivalent of our Queen's speech. And I think that is an appropriate way forward and gives certainty to elected members. And over the next coming days, we will see a number of these reports populate the forward business plan. I think I usually bring a bit of jest to these proceedings and will not fail to do so today. I think that what we are seeing today in terms of the Conservative budget is, first of all, a transformation of the Conservative Party. I find it fascinating that the Conservative Scottish Parliament Manifesto is going to include a number of key Labour proposals, such as supporting free school meals for all P1 to P7 pupils, but also supporting more funding for a bus network, which is something that a Tory budget in this council 3 years ago proposed to cut. Although I do think it's fair to say we're also seeing the unravelling of this Tory budget before our very eyes. During the course of this debate, we've heard we're going to have a root and branch review of planning, further resources for transport, funding for Annan Harbour, another £10.8 million of roads investment, and money to local groups to help cut grass verges, despite the fact that actually the Conservative budget proposes to end contracts for grass cutting. Now, I don't necessarily oppose all or many of these initiatives, but there's absolutely not 1 ounce of detail in the Conservative budget today to back up any of what they have said. And I think that it's very important that we have a due process. And I think that that's what this administration provides. So I think we've had a good debate here today. I think we're rapidly moving on to the motions and amendment. And I've got to say, I think to finish off, Leader, Malcolm Johnson just about sold the administration budget as well as I could do, and I look forward to him supporting us when it comes to the vote.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Can I just check whether or not Councillor Sloan has rejoined the meeting?
No, he hasn't, Leader.
Right. In that case, there have no more. Oh, sorry, we have another. We have Councillor Inglis wants to speak. So I'll bring in Councillor Inglis.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've listened to this for the last hour and a half to 2 hours, and it's been a real back-patting exercise. There are a few points I'd like to make and 1 question I would like to ask. The current administration has presided over child poverty, which is up 2.8%, the 5th highest in Scottish regional councils over the last 4 years.
A DG1 debacle which saw us spend over £40 million on a building which sits on our books at £14 million, and we've no idea whether it'll get anywhere near covering its running costs. A road contract which cost the public £4.2 million, and it would appear that no one was to blame for that. The Stranraer Harbour, the stagnation of the Stranraer Harbour project, the stagnation of the George Hotel project, massive underinvestment in our roads infrastructure over the past 4 years, which we are now going to have to run flat out to try and catch up with. We say our #1 priority is building the local economy, yet only 30% or so of the council budget is spent within Dumfries and Galloway. Lack of major investment in tourism economy, which is worth in excess of £300 million to the region and employs over 6,000 people, and zero investment in the core path network throughout the region over the last 4 years. So why should the public show faith in this current administration and its budget? Thank you, Leader.
The public will be invited to make their decisions or their judgment on the administration and indeed on the opposition when it comes to the local government elections next year. I'd have to say that much of your contribution was inaccurate, but I have an offer from Councillor Hagman to respond to you. Councillor Hagman.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to come back to Councillor Ingalls. I mean, we have had a good debate today, and I think that has been reflected in the comments that we have received on both sides of either supporting the administration budget or the Conservative budget. Just to come back on a few points made by Councillor Ingalls in terms of the administration budget, we've been exceedingly clear in how we take forward this council and the administration. There is going to be significant funding coming in, and it would be exceedingly easy to rush in, make rash decisions, and I think the phrase is fools rush in where angels fear to tread. There's also accusations of the administration presiding over various essentially disasters within the council. And what I would say is actually, yeah, these things have happened, and I am proud of the fact that the administration has tackled these issues head on. We as a joint administration have worked together collaboratively. We have put together robust responses to what we have discovered, so to speak, and we have put in place the measures to ensure that we never end up in a situation that we had inherited within this council. So I'm confident that the council administration, building on the budget of what I would hope to see approved today, will actually leave this council in a far better position than what we inherited it from. In terms of specific issues on core paths, well, actually, if Councillor Ingalls would want to read our administration budget, there's actually reference to the work that we're planning on doing with core paths, and there has in fact been additional investment in terms of core paths. And yeah, as I say, I would be delighted to have those discussions with Councillor Ingalls, and I look forward to his contribution to our debates as we take forward this plan and have those robust conversations through our service committees. So thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Hagman. I will put out one last call for Councillor Sloan, and then as there are no other indications of anybody wanting to speak, I'll pass back to Councillor Ian Carruthers to sum up. Councillor Sloan, is he present?
No, he's not present, Leader.
Okay, Councillor Ian Carruthers, would you like to sum up on your motion?
Yep, thank you, Leader. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I've had my earphones out, they were reverberating. So, I mean, I think it's been a good discussion today. We've had good debate. There's a degree of hostility starting to come in at the end, but ultimately, within the Conservative group, one thing we can do, and that is count. So there's 43 members on this council. 22 is the number that carries the vote when it comes to it. Councillor Sloan's gone, so there's only 42, fair enough. But 99.9% sure our budget would probably not be supported across by a majority vote today, but ultimately we'll still have to go to the vote to actually see that. So that's the case. we have to, in order, in real terms, what would happen anywhere else was the budget would be proposed by the governing body, like I've said earlier, whether it's administration or government, whoever it may be in the circumstances, and amendments and proposals would come in at this side. You've given us some degree of reassurance that as we go forward over the year, the extra monies that are coming in, we will be able to have our democratic right to voice our opinions through the committee structure, so we accept that. But ultimately, for the Conservative staff to put forward a full budget, just to really look at the commonalities as we've already spoken about. And there's only really two major differences, I would say, between the two budgets, and that is that, okay, we've made it clear verbally, the White Sands is off the record for us, it's off the agenda, and that's we need higher levels of investment in trunk roads. That has to happen, and I'm sure that'll happen through the structures that have been outlined previously. But it's a numbers thing there. If we face up to facts, it is actually a numbers thing. So we knew pretty much before we came into this meeting what the probable outcome will be. So it is about a matter of having that small adjournment, going to the vote and getting to that outcome. The White Sands is still on the agenda as far as the administration is concerned, and there's a lack of investment in roads. That's the main point. So I think I picked up from this particular meeting that I was pretty much aware of before I went in, but that might be addressed partly as we go through. But I formally moved the Conservative and Unionist budget as presented.
I think you moved that at the beginning of the meeting. So you didn't
Yeah, you're correct. Sorry.
Can I just to sum up for us, I'd like to thank all members for their contributions. Also repeat the thanks that many others have made over the course of the debate to all the council staff who have worked so hard during this last year. This has been an extremely difficult year for everybody. For some people, obviously more than others, but I think our staff have really shown their merit. They've stepped up to the plate. Many have taken on different roles that they never expected to have. They've worked hours they didn't expect to have to work. And I think the council's reputation with the public has increased due to their hard work and their efforts. In terms of the budget, I'd like to also to thank all the supporting staff, the finance staff, the governance staff, and everybody who's helped us in bringing this forward. I think the interesting thing about, we have been forced by circumstances to start looking at our budgets in a different way. It always had been the case that you put up a whole load of templates on the day and folk voted on them, and that was what you were going to do for the next year. We've been forced by circumstances to start doing things differently. We were forced by circumstance last year to start doing things differently. And I think that's actually brought with it benefits. And one of the benefits will be that we will develop policy. We've actually announced policy intentions, and it is a little bit like the programme from government, as I think one of the contributors said. That says what the government wants to do. We've said what the administration wants to do, but we will be inclusive in taking that forward. So it will go through committee with discussion, with contributions from across the political spectrum. This is not just about us imposing our will on others. This is about us as a council developing our policies together. And we hope that you will support the administration's budget to take advantage of that opportunity to work together to take our council out of the horrendous circumstances we've been in and to place our region at the forefront of recovery, so that hopefully when we get through all this, our region will be able to recover and hold its own, more than hold its own with others. There may be opportunities in this, and let's grasp those opportunities and let's go forward as consensually as we can to work for the betterment of Dumfries and Galloway and for the recovery of our people, the social and economic recovery of our people after this terrible pandemic. Now, I'm going to suggest that we have a period of about 10 minutes just to ensure that people are able to connect to record their vote. Now, I'm not sure whether Councillor Sloan has permanently left the meeting or whether he was intending to come back, and I just wonder whether somebody could try and contact him and see if he did wish to come back to vote. So I suggest I will call the vote at 12:48, just to give people that opportunity to ensure that everybody is connected and able to cast a vote. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I think everybody has been contacted to see whether or not they are able to vote. So I will pass over to Vlad to read the amendment and the motion, and then to take the vote by roll call.
Thank you, Leader. If I could start with the motion as proposed by the Leader and seconded by the Deputy, is to agree the Administration's budget proposals for 2021-2022. Agree the ongoing certainty facing the region requires the Council to remain flexible and responsive in order to best support the region's social and economic recovery from COVID-19. Agree that the future opportunities and challenges, along with the policy intentions outlined in the budget, will be incorporated into the Council's forward business plan and considered by the appropriate committees prior to the Council's summer recess. Agree the indicative capital investment strategy 2021-22 and 23-24, proposing the Administration Group budget proposal, further agreeing that a short-term review of the strategy be carried out by the Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee. The amendment, as proposed by Councillor Carruthers and seconded by Councillor Fairborn, is to agree the Conservative and Unionist budget proposal 2021-22. And if it's okay with yourself, Leader, I'll now proceed to the vote.
Please do.
I should say at the start that there are a couple of members who, as I understand, have left the meeting, and I'll point these out as I go along. Leader?
Motion.
Deputy Leader?
Motion.
Councillor Bell?
Amendment.
Councillor Blake?
Amendment.
Councillor Brodie?
Motion.
Councillor Dougie Campbell?
Motion.
Councillor John Campbell?
Motion.
Councillor Ian Carruthers?
Amendment.
Councillor Karen Carruthers?
Amendment.
Councillor Charteris?
Amendment.
Councillor Dempster?
Motion.
Councillor Drybart?
Motion.
Councillor Drysdale?
Amendment.
Councillor Fairbairn?
Amendment.
Councillor Ferguson?
Motion.
Councillor Gusty?
Amendment.
Councillor Hagman?
Motion, please.
Councillor Howie?
Motion.
Councillor Hislop?
Amendment.
Councillor English?
Amendment.
Councillor James?
Amendment.
Councillor Johnston?
Amendment.
Councillor Lever?
Motion.
Councillor Little? Councillor Little? I'll come back. The councillor. Councillor McGregor?
Amendment.
Okay. I can now take Councillor Little's for the motion, as per the chat. Councillor McClelland? Councillor McClelland?
Motion.
Thank you. Councillor McComb?
Motion.
Councillor McKee?
Motion.
Councillor Maitland?
Motion.
Councillor Marshall.
Motion.
Councillor Martin.
Motion.
Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Nicholson. I will come back to Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Ronnie.
Amendment.
I will check whether Councillor Scobie's in the meeting, but as I understand, he's now left the meeting. And the same for Councillor Sloan. Councillor Stitt.
Motion.
Councillor Surtees.
Motion.
Councillor Tate.
Amendment.
Councillor Thompson.
Motion.
Councillor Wilson.
Motion, but Councillor Nicholson has messaged me to say he's struggling to be able to register it via the chat and speaking.
Okay. Is there a? We'll try and get hold of him if that's possible. I'll just ask Nick if it'd be possible to call him. Councillor Wood.
Amendment.
And Councillor Young.
Motion.
And I think Nick has confirmed that Councillor Nicholson is voting for the motion. If you give me a couple of minutes just to count that up, please. If you could just bear with me, we're just checking the figures again to make sure it's correct. Okay, I make it 25 for the motion and 15 for the amendment.
Thank you. I have no other business deemed urgent, so that is the end of the meeting. May I thank members for their contributions. I look forward to working with you as outlined over the coming months, and our next meeting is on the 25th of March. And have a good weekend. Have a good weekend when it comes.
Thank you, Chair.